Welcome back. How are you?
All right, how are you?
Good. Let's jump right in. Here's Chuck Todd speaking to the issue of Benghazi, among other things,
Okay.
but also speaking to what's a real scandal. And he mentions the real scandal is the veterans scandal. I think both are, but roll it.
And it's this bipartisan outrage that's the reason why this VA issue and scandal is a much bigger story right now, frankly, than the investigation in Benghazi. It's the outrage from both sides of the aisle coupled with the competency issue of the Obama administration that they were facing since the healthcare website debacle that could be actually a real political problem for this presidency and perhaps for Democrats moving forward. But this one has legs, and it's very dangerous for the White House, much more so, frankly, than the partisanized Benghazi.
Okay. A few things jumped out at me there. One, yes, this story does have legs. I would agree. But the diminishing of Benghazi, or the attempt to diminish Benghazi, has been partisanized, not assigning who made it that way, as well as what the truth is about Benghazi is you have elements of deception that we've seen over the last 19 months when it comes to that issue. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think that, he's sort of raising a straw man to knock down Benghazi by saying the Veterans Affairs thing is so much more important. If it's so much more important, then why haven't people like him brought it to the fore long before now? That's number one. Number two, the VA has been doing stuff like this for quite some time. I'd like to, as much as I'd like to blame the Obama administration, this has been an ongoing problem as far back as the 90s. I think it's reaching critical mass now because we're literally allowing veterans to die while cooking the books on their waiting times, and it's finally coming to the front of the line in terms of scandals, But that doesn't diminish the fact. That doesn't diminish the fact that 4 Americans died in Benghazi. We don't even know exactly what's going on there. To this day, between 25 and 30 people, Americans forget there were 25 or 30, as many as 30 other people who were also in Benghazi who have apparently been locked away somewhere or threatened with something that have kept them from saying anything about this to anybody.
Speaking of cooking the books, here is a VA clerk speaking to that issue in a CNN report about cooking the books. Roll it.
So it could be 3 months, and it looks like 14 days?
It could be 3 months, and it looked like no days. It looked like they had scheduled the appointment and got exactly
fudging the
what
books
they
is
want.
That's my...
I would call it that. You could call it that. The VA doesn't call it that. They call it zeroing out.
And as you said, this is a problem that has been around since the 90s, critical mass in the sense that veterans are dying. Yet, speaking to the issue of Benghazi, attempting to diminish Benghazi and recognize that the Veterans Affairs Administration is failing our veterans is a huge problem, and we need to focus in on it. I just wanted people to realize when Arnold's speaking to Cooking the Books, he documents what he has to say, and he wrote an article a little while back, I think a week and a half ago, if I'm not mistaken, and that report came from this past week. So he's doing the work. Yes. Go ahead.
I'd like to make an interesting comparison for people, too.
Sure.
Okay, what is the VA administration but government-run health care? And if they're going to do this to people who have put their lives on the line for the country, which I would argue puts them in terms of the pecking order at the top of the heap of American citizens, what are they going to do to all the rest of us when Obamacare comes to full blossom here? Because I suspect that as bad as the care is for the VA, and they're dealing with a subset of a large population, when you start talking about the same kind of bureaucratic inertia or books cooking or whatever you want to call it, and you subject, what are we up to, about 316 or 17 million people in this country right now? Imagine what will happen then.
An excellent point, an observation. Tell me this, Arnold, when you hear the First Lady speak of the Nigerian terrorist group Boko Haram, which you are certainly not unfamiliar with, 2011.
No, I'm not.
I wanted to get your response. Roll it.
In these girls, Barack and I see our own daughters. We see their hopes and their dreams. And we can only imagine the anguish their parents are feeling right now. Many of them may have been hesitant to send their daughters off to school, fearing that harm might come their way. But they took that risk because they believed in their daughter's promise and wanted to give them every opportunity to succeed.
Arnold, you covered Boko Haram in 2011.
That's correct.
Front Page Mag.
And the interesting thing about it was the quote from the former AFRICOM commander, General Carter Ham, who at that time noted that Boko Haram was forming a loose partnership with Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb and Al-Shabaab, a Somali-based terror group that killed 70 people at the World Cup soccer matches in Uganda in 2010. And he characterized that development as one that would be, quote, the most dangerous thing to happen not only to Africans but to us as well. So I guess, as I said in my piece, what we're really dealing with here is what I called selective outrage. Apparently, because the Boko Haram killed 100 people in 2011, and since then they have been on quite a crusade of killing. I didn't document it all in my column because space didn't allow it, but these people have been a known quantity for quite some time. So the fact that suddenly America is being subjected to these because they've kidnapped girls, this is not the first time they've kidnapped people. This is not the first time. They've slaughtered plenty of people. But for some reason, this one has caught on, and as I say in my column, I believe it's because it has that element of the war against women that sort of resonates with the American left.
With the selective outrage that you point to and how it goes into or connects with one of their themes, there are a lot of people on the left, I believe, and you can feel free to disabuse me of this notion, but the idea is that they mean well. They hear these things and they're outraged and they're carrying the banner and they're saying yes. And when people like me or Crane Durham gets on and goes, this is an absolute failure of policy to greater connect everything that we're in, understand Islamofascism, etc., Islamism, understanding the war that we are in, they're going to tune out. They're not going to be on board for that. Yet they really do want justice. They really do desire people to be protected from these brutal thugs. But there doesn't seem to be an awareness of how these things are connected. How do we do a better job? Or do you agree with that?
Well, I not only agree with that, I don't think you've taken it far enough. I would think that up until this point, if you had said something about the Boko Haram, you might have been labeled an Islamophobe for your efforts. Because, again, the left is very selective in its indignation as to what constitutes Islamic atrocities and what constitutes bigotry on the part of Americans. And I think to a certain extent that is part of what progressivism is all about. And that's what I said in my column as well. Progressivism is an ideology that allows one to take diametrically opposed positions. It's entirely situational. You can be forced something one day and against it the next, depending on how it fits your particular agenda. Just as John Kerry was for the war in Iraq before he was against it.
Okay, yeah, and I actually wanted to trace that, because the interesting thing is that people go back to Iraq, and I think that was something, I mean, that I get in comments even from, I'll care about Benghazi when you care about the Iraq war dead. And as, you know, so many different ways I go to that, and one of them is outrage at the idea of not recognizing what was sacrificed on the altar of national on the altar of politics was national security so clearly. But then we shift to these ideas that have been these false narratives that have built up, and they just add to them anything that will stick, and we're never really talking about the issue. How can we do a better job of focusing and bringing those who are willing, not the radical leftists who understand what they're doing, but the people on the who are just becoming more involved in the process, either because their economic policies of this administration and I would say of the left have put us there, or they are waking up because they realize, wow, these things have a consequence, my health care, et cetera. Your thoughts?
Well, I think you've hit on the fundamental problem, okay? I think the fundamental problem in this nation currently is that the left controls the narrative. And because they control the narrative, it becomes almost, I wouldn't say impossible, but it takes a certain amount of chutzpah and determination to challenge these people and challenge them where they actually tell lies. You know, you can go back and find quote after quote after quote from Democrats about the danger Saddam Hussein presented. You can go back and look at two congressional hearings that determined there was no manipulation of the information leading up to the determination that there were weapons of mass destruction there. You can even find articles about the 500 tons of yellow cake that were secretly removed from the country after being hidden for 4 years. But it almost doesn't matter to these people. Whenever you challenge them on any of their assumptions, they're always looking for something to throw back at you, whether it's true or not. And it's pretty tough to cut through that, especially when you consider I mean, as I've told you before, I think the fundamental battle for the nation's soul doesn't reside in Congress. It resides in the nation's public school system and our university system. And there is no question that the radical left has gained an enormous foothold in public schools and almost a total control of colleges.
And what we have done is, as you've talked about, and what today, when I read this earlier today, Arnold, I was amazed at the range of you connecting these things, and you did it so well that I thought to myself, I can't even really do this on air because I won't be able to do it. But you really go to the issue of symbolism over genuine substance. And please expound upon that, because that's what we're dealing with President Obama, quite frankly, the symbolism of what sounds great, the reality of what is.
Well, I mean, I said, you know, the only thing clearer than the outrage regarding the kidnap of those girls is the utter impotency that accompanies it. And I said that impotency is personified first by First Lady Michelle Obama, who, like so many of her fellow progressives, believes that posing somberly and holding up a sign with a Twitter hashtag, in her case, bring back our girls, amounts to something other than, you know, flaccid self-indulgence. And I said her husband isn't much better because the most powerful man in the world claims he wakes up every day and thinks about the young girls in Nigeria. And so I asked the question, what does he actually do about the young girls in Nigeria? And for people who don't know, our commander-in-chief has dispatched a contingent of 7 military and State Department officials to that nation, and they will join 50 security experts already stationed in the country. So what we have is 57 Americans who are spearheading the fight against hundreds of heavily armed and ruthless Islamist killers. Somehow I think that's a less than appropriate response. I'm kind of hoping, unlike many of conservatives who immediately assume that that's the thing, I would like to think somewhere in my heart, trying to be fair, that maybe that's a diversion to obscure the fact that maybe we're dumping a couple of squadrons of SEAL Type 6 folks into that country who are going to hunt these guys down and eliminate them with extreme prejudice. But that's me just trying to be optimistic because, again, I, for the life of me, could never understand why we would announce what our intentions are to people who would kidnap young girls.
It's an excellent question, but I would, just from past experience, if there is a successful mission and that does happen, we'll hear about it right before the election, even if it...
Now, what could possibly make you say that other than the constant spiking of the football whenever they get a chance?
Right. Well, that's the other part is something that has come out in the ability to identify the misleading versus the truth. Now, within a very short period of time at the top of the show, I played Eleanor Cliff, that you're aware of, I know, about her statement about
yeah.
I played that clip, and then I played the clip from Steve Kroft and President Obama. And then I played the debate, and I edited it for time, where President Obama denies what he said to Steve Kroft on September 12th, October 16th, that debate, where Candy Crawley reached in and contaminated the debate. Now, the reason I highlight this is it is so clear that it's not something where you have to invent how clear it is, and pointing that out. And as you have done in a way that is very clear and quite entertaining, and quite frankly, I thought if you don't put together a book of your articles, then I'm going to ask to, because it is that good. In understanding, you connect academia, you connect Boko Haram, academia, and abortion, and go to the issue in your close about symbolism versus substance and what the reality is. That all said, a very long lead up to this. Mm-hmm. There are so many conservatives who say, I am frustrated. It is so clear, as we've just talked about with the examples. And yet, we're here where we are. Now, you mentioned the public school system, and you know what colleges are today.
Yep.
So how is it do we compete with the people that are exposing this, like you, arguably like me, and nothing but truth, coming from, I'm a conservative, make no bones about it, being marginalized and written off, that's right-wing hate division, because it seems people really don't want to be divisive. They want to be liked. They want people to get along. I think peace, love, dope. Okay, thanks, James Earl Jones. Movie character.
Do you really think that? Do you really think people want to get along? Because, one of the things I do when I read any article on the internet now is I make sure as much as I can to go to the
comments,
because, even if they start off quasi-intellectual, by the time you get to about the 9th or 10th comment, now you're on the playground. It's, you are, am too, no, you are, no, I am, it's like, and it eventually deteriorates. Or there's always somebody who's willing to just bring in a complete non sequitur as a way of diverting it from the initial argument. And I suspect that that's a tactic. I also suspect that, again, part of the problem we have in public schools is that we don't teach children how to think anymore. We teach them how to feel. And I remember that was a big thing when I first went to school back in my own high school and days when it was all of a sudden, don't tell me what you think about something, tell me how you feel about something. Well, I never bought into that, so I was always a problem for some of my teachers because feelings can be manipulated. Facts can't be manipulated, and neither can logic, which is why I don't know if I suspect you're aware of this, but maybe some of your listeners aren't. But there are people out there who complain that logic, as in A equals B, B equals C, A equals C, is a white man's construct designed to keep people of color down or to keep people oppressed because they don't think logically. Now, to me, that's utter bankruptcy. But
that's a really nice way to put it. But I think you're right, Arnold, to get there, not to interrupt, but hopefully interject in the moments we have, and then I'm going to be quiet because I want you to close it out. But here's the point. They tell us, want to get along, get along, get along. And they talk about divisiveness in politics, yet divisiveness in the sense of stating what is clear and what is true is going to be divisive when you're dealing with people who lie. And that's why when I hear the left and they bring up Newt Gingrich, okay? And I have to find a way to bring him in. But Harry Reid mentioned him last week. I was curious why.
But he took a break from the Koch brothers.
Yeah, he goes, what candidate do you fear the most of the Republicans? And he goes, Newt Gingrich, and tongue-in-cheek, which I believe Newt scares the daylights out of them. But here's the point. The idea is if you tell the truth, you are creating division. You are the problem by telling the truth. And it takes away from what people have in their foundation of telling it like it is. So they shy away and try to massage it, and they can never defeat a liberal by going halfway with the truth. You got to expose it. That's their goal.
Well, and then
Yeah,
you
go ahead.
become mean-spirited.
Exactly.
And
so the idea
there's
is not
almost no way to
go
win
ahead.
the game,
Yeah.
if you want to call it a game.
And so the key is to be declarative. And
Well, I think the key to I
Go ahead.
really believe the key is to be fearless. You know, don't get cowed by the fallback. I'm not a bigot. I'm not a racist. I'm not a sexist, and nobody can tell me that I am, no matter how hard they try.
Amen. Amen. And it's funny, the line I use most on this is, I'm not part of the hate squad of the idiots at the Westboro Baptist Church or the KKK or Black Panthers, but they're going to do everything they can to put me into that box. If you have an IQ above room temperature, you surely know that's not true. I'll tell you this. I'm posting both of your articles. This one was one of the best ever. Incredible work. Thank you. Movie reference, by the way, my wife loved. Arnold Ahlert.
One of the best written movies ever.
Here it is. Great close. Arnold Ahlert, thank you. Nothing but truth. Honor your life. Compassion in your heart. Always keep the faith in